Hector, this is such a treat to get to talk to you. I am so excited about this. You grew up in New York.
Yeah.
Right? In New York City?
Uh-huh. I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in Queens, went to school there. Then spent summers in Rhode Island on this farm that my mom owned.
So is that where you got into farming?
That's where I got it. Yeah, that's where the bug started. And I went in the Army and I got all this, ideas of saving the world kind of complex. So I got into social work and all this other stuff. But then I got back into it when I was in Georgia and back here.
So you've always sort of been on this path of peace, right?
Well, actually, that came after the war. I was in World War II for 2.5 years, and I saw enough that I never, ever wanted to be a part of that again. And so I became active and actively promoting peace and reconciliation between different people with big differences and small differences too.
Was there something, Hector, in your childhood that sort of you think laid the foundation for that, or?
Well, my mom, I don't think she'd have called herself nonviolent or a pacifist or anything, but she was very socially conscious. She voted for Norman Thomas as long as he ran for president, and she was she was just so excited when Eleanor Roosevelt resigned from the DAR, from when they refused to let Marian Anderson sing at their building in Washington, D.C.
Well, when you were living, after World War II, and you were living communally, trying some different things, what were you looking for?
Well, I was really looking for a way of life that would be just and where people cared about each other.
Tell us about Patricia.
Okay. Yeah, we were living in this all ghetto neighborhood, and behind us we had a little yard to our house, and behind us there was an apartment building with a mother and 2 little girls that were about the ages of our children. Their mama went to work every day, so they were often at our house, actually pretty regularly at our house after school. And then their mama would sometimes drink up the rent money and they'd be thrown out on the street, and the kids would stay with us until she found another apartment. And so they got to be really close to our children and to Suzy and me. And when it got time for us to leave, they asked if they could come with us. And so their mama said yes when I asked her. And they came with us up to Pennsylvania. We went to this Quaker school up there. And Trish lived with us, and she just blossomed. She was very artistic and did this big mural on the high school wall in Dallas, Georgia. Just been integrated, and then she went on to college and graduated with highest honors from Fisk in Nashville, and then she went on to Atlanta University and got her master's in library science. And she was the first one in her family ever to finish college, to have a house of her own.
When she was tragically murdered, what a horrible thing that was for you, for your whole family. What a loss, because she was doing such incredible things.
Yeah, she was. She was living in this, it was a changing neighborhood in Atlanta where she'd bought a house, and she worked at the library with children. very much children such as she had been, you know, who had trouble reading and writing and speaking clearly. She was a storyteller, among other things, and she took a child from the neighborhood, adopted her, and got her through college and marriage. She was working late one night, and this guy he was a crack addict. Saw no lights on at her house, so he was that's what he did. He was stealing for his habit, and that was about all he did, was steal and get crack. He'd never killed anybody before, but he strangled her. I thought he was a monster, that only a monster could have done what he did. And it was a monstrous crime, there's no doubt about it, but I felt it was important to separate the man, the person, from the crime, and separate the sin from the sinner, I guess is a way you could put it too. And to hate the one, but not the other. Patricia's buried here on our farm. We have a little cemetery. Actually, it was a place where Suzy and I had planned to be buried.
How did you get there, Hector? How did you get to that place of forgiveness? Because you said it affected your faith.
Oh, it sure did. I lost my faith for a while because I just asked, where was God? How could God allow this to happen? And it was also, when I look back on it, it seems so weird. You know, I felt like I was the only person in the whole doggone world who had suffered in this way. And then, you know, when I kind of came out of it, I realized that there are millions of people who have lost their loved ones too. They've been blown to bits, they've been shot, they've been murdered in various ways in crime. It's just, well, it just made me feel like that revenge and getting even, anger and hate are, I just believe so strongly that they're all destructive forces, and that peace and reconciliation and love, you know, are the strongest forces in the world. And that's what we need to project. That's what we need to allow to come into our lives. I think it's the only, you know, the cycle of violence. People talk about how violence begets violence and everything, and it just goes on and on and on. And I really came to the realization that the only way to stop it was to say it stops here, right here with me. I will not hate. I will not get revenge. I'll not hit back. And here we think about it. I mean, that's what you hear in church, the Sermon on the Mount, is that's what it is. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. You know, forgive 70 times 7.
Was he remorseful? Was Ivan remorseful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a thing, too. That I guess in our case, you know, not all criminals are remorseful. And I think in our case, when when he was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, when he knew he was going to die in prison and his life was, so to speak, over, that he went up to the microphone and with tears streaming down his cheeks apologized twice for the pain he had caused. You know, that night was when I forgave him, because I couldn't get it out of my mind. You know, a person could say, okay, big deal. You killed my daughter and you're sorry, huh? Right. But it wasn't, I just didn't feel that way. I mean, I felt, when I thought about that, I felt he had nothing. His life was over. You know, he's going to die in jail, and he apologized, and it was the only thing he had to give me, was that apology, and to the rest of the people who had been hurt. And it really moved me. I suppose in a lot of ways it does look crazy writing to him. I don't think anybody else writes to him. And I just feel, well, I guess really I feel that's what God wants me to do, and that it's not always easy to do, but I really feel like it's what I should do. And some of the things that come up that I should do are, you know, they're kind of just taken by themselves. They're weird. I mean, visiting men on death row. Now, why in Sam would you do that? You know, these guys, their lives are over, so to speak. You were probably going to be dying and everything. And I find being with them and talking with them. They know my story. They know about Trish.
The work you're talking about is your current prison work. You're going into Nashville?
Yeah, and to Brushy Mountain.
And how did you get involved in that?
Oh, that's a... I don't know if you ever met Verna Wyatt, but she heads this group in Nashville called You Have the Power, which is a victims' rights advocacy group, and they're very pro-death penalty. And so we were on opposite sides at Vanderbilt Law School once in talking about the death penalty. And I went up afterwards to shake her hand, and then a friend of mine was debating her on PBS, actually, at the Nashville station on the death penalty. And he said, Hector, call in and tell your story. So I called in and was waiting to be put on the program, and I heard her say, we have to do something about the conditions that lead children to a life of crime. And so I said, Verna, I think we got something to talk about. Yeah. And so I thought, oh gosh, you're going to listen to this old fool. I'll call her up, she'll just hang up on me. And so I waited a couple of weeks, and then I said, well, she can hang up. And so I called her up and asked if she'd have a cup of coffee with me if I came over to Nashville. And she said yes. So we met at a coffee shop, and she brought one of her co-workers with her. And it was kind of, you know, it was all right, but no depth really. And then she started talking about their work in the prisons and their attempts to stop the rate of lower the recidivism rate. And I asked if I could come, and she said yes. So I came to one of their classes, and then I asked if I could come again, and she said yes. And on the second time, she said, Hector, would you tell your story? And so I did tell my story, and, you know, I didn't withhold anything about my feelings about the death penalty. And she didn't seem to mind a bit. And eventually, she invited me to come. And that happened a couple of times, and she said, well, I feel I really ought to give you something for your gas and your time. So she gave me $50 for coming over there. And then she gave me $100 for coming over there. And in the course of all this time, well, actually, at one of the last times I was over there, she stood in front of the group of prisoners and said, I have to tell you that I have forgiven the man who murdered my sister-in-law, and that hatred has been ruining my relationship with my family and my friends. You could feel it. It was like an atmosphere that she carried with her for a long time, and I could feel her changing and becoming less angry. But I wasn't expecting that. But I don't know how far she's carried it. You know, I haven't seen her for maybe as much as a year now. But we got to be good friends. You know, we give each other hugs. We saw each other, and she asked how Suzy was doing and everything. And we got Suzy over there one time. This was great. This big, huge black guy who said, I took my grandma all over the place in a wheelchair, so she just wheeled Suzy around. And of course, Suzy loved it.
Right. So what is the relationship with you and these death row inmates? How many of them are there?
Well, there's a group of about 9 that we meet with. It was started by a fellow named Jim Boyd, and there were just the 3. He asked me to come over and tell my story. He'd heard my story somewhere, I don't know where. So I came over, and there were just the three of us, and one of them was Mama Cox, who was about this high, 84 years old, and Jim and me. And there's maybe 9 prisoners from death row. And we talk about all kinds of stuff. I told my story there, and then we discuss all kinds of subjects. We were into the Reformation, and I don't know what all. You know, I said to Jim once, how come these guys are so smart? They know all this church age. He said, they got nothing to do but read. But it's just, well, there's one man who, he made a couple of, he never said an awful lot, but he said at one point, I never loved anybody and nobody ever loved me. And then, what did he say another time? He said, I ran away from a Catholic orphanage when I was 12 years old, and I've been in trouble ever since. And so I thought there's got to be something more than that. And so I asked if I could visit one-on-one with him, and I did. And I found out, you know, just by asking and listening, that he had lived on a farm when he was a teenager, his cousin's farm. He had a rough life. His father beat him and whatnot. But this was a beautiful memory for him, and his face changed, his voice changed when he was talking about it. And then I asked him if he had ever loved a woman. And he said, nah. And then, well, yeah, there was. This woman, I would have married her. But why would I want to bring her into this life of mine? You know? And then now he's I think for the first time realizing how much pain he brought into the world, and it's tormenting him. He says he wakes up screaming from horrible dreams, and it's the same. You know, I went to Brushy Mountain, and a similar thing happened. A small class of 40 that was, and I asked about questions, and this big guy, maybe in his middle 30s or so, started talking, and then he broke down, and it was so painful because like he'd never cried for 20 years. You know, he just so, and he said it was the first time he started to think about the people who loved the man that he had killed. And you know, that class was, that really kind of blew me away, because I don't know why. You know, I usually, you know, walk out the door after I've done the talk, but it's just like something made me go down and shake hands with every one of those guys and look them in the eye. I just, that was just such a powerful moment. Because they all looked directly at me. It was just, I don't know what all. I don't know what all's going on, but I really felt as though God was using me. It sounds awfully arrogant to say, and it's not me actually. It just kind of really, I felt like God's love was not in me, but coming through me, and it was just beautiful. I just couldn't. I can't help. I keep thinking about it, and usually, you know, I wrote to the woman who runs the class, and it turns out she's a classmate of Rose's from Tennessee Tech.
Is that right?
And I asked if I could come back, and she said she thought that'd be a good idea.
Is that your new work? Is to really show love in places that people maybe have never experienced that? I
think so, yeah. I mean, it's just, oh gosh, I mean, prison life, whether it's death row is, I think it's probably, you know, being isolated in your own cell. You're not even together with anybody. I'm so grateful that at least the class, they're together. And I think when they exercise, the guys are together for an hour. But they're mostly isolated and have to yell from cell to cell to communicate. But I think prison life, the hostility that builds up, and anger, and, you know, I don't know, it just, how it may, I think part of it's maybe my perception of it. It may not always be that way. But I would like to to see what would happen if the guys actually started, instead of doing this, would do a little more of this, and listening to each other and helping each other. Now, you could make it a little less of a hell. It'd still be a hard life, but and that's something I think it's within their power to change, and that's what I would like. That's what I'd like to do anyway in the world.
You shared your story on NPR, right? StoryCorps. StoryCorps was in Nashville, and people can go there and hear it.
That's right. And I think you can do it on a computer even. You can go to StoryCorps and put my name on. Yeah.
Was that a good experience?
Yes, yes it was. It sure was.
And do you hear from people who?
Yes, I had heard from people, friends of mine, who had no idea that this had happened, and then people who had no idea who I was. It just felt so encouraged and by the possibility, I guess, of forgiveness. I mean, who doesn't need it? I mean, may not have ever killed anybody, but I mean, we all do things we're not very proud of. So I think it's a universal need. A universal need.
You know, Hector, in closing, what advice or what help can you give to somebody who maybe they're not there yet? Maybe they want to forgive, but they're still full of bitterness and anger, and it may be something simple. It may be just a verbal wrong, or how can they get there?
I wish there was, I could say that just do this and it'll, it's like, I don't know. I actually, you know, when I think about it, I think it's a gift that was given to Suzy and to me, a gift of God. But but it's not an exclusive gift. I mean, it's not a gift that wouldn't be given to anybody else. I'm sure of that. Heavens. And so, I guess it's maybe a matter of being open, a matter of recognizing our common humanity. And there's that wonderful African word of Ubuntu, this connection. We belong to each other, and when I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. And that came out in those Truth and Reconciliation Commission meetings, and I remember that powerful saying. That woman, when this one of the most awful of the apartheid, I don't know whether it was a colonel or a general, but he was responsible for murder and torture of God knows how many people. And this woman whose family her husband had been killed, said, I hope he realizes our tears are not just for our husbands and our children, but our tears are also for him. And I think that's what the place we need to get to, where we can feel for one another like that.
We'll get there. We'll get there.